Welcome to the Underclass Podcast with Austin Picard. I'm an independent researcher who can't stomach being lied to on a daily basis by the mainstream media, while we live in a fracturing society launched into parallel realities, falling perfectly onto the two sides of the political spectrum. I remain in the underclass. This week, we explore the darkest layers of modern society, which largely remain in the shadows, deliberately obscuring the vision of the general public. Our undisclosed enemies, shrouded in darkness, intentionally unraveling the very moral fabric disrupting the international community at large. As we remain headstrong in the pursuit of truth, we stumble across the path of our common enemy, possessed with the darkest ambitions, unbeknownst to the vast majority, involving complicated cover-ups, sexual blackmail, childhood trauma, methods of mind control, and even ritualized murder or blood sacrifice, requiring the use of ancient runes by various groups who tend to believe in the magical elements of neo-paganism. We must first understand the reconstructed ideology of our enemy if we are to defend against them. As we prioritize separate cases involving extraordinary overlap while sharing stark parallels with each other, we venture into the shadows, only to re-emerge in the midst of a moral crisis. The quote, long attributed to Italian poet and philosopher Dante Alighieri, comes to mind. The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. And so our perilous journey through this inverted moral landscape begins by introducing the twisted tale known as the Hosanna Church scandal. It was first brought to my attention in the context of providing the inspiration for the plotline behind the nonlinear narrative of the first season of True Detective, an American anthology crime drama created by Nick Pizzolatto, starring Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. The word Hosanna itself happens to represent a plea for salvation in the Old Testament, translating from Hebrew into "please save us." With the benefit of hindsight, even the name of the church serves as a sort of veiled prophetic warning, emblematic of the morbid machinations and torturous techniques that followed. According to an article published in the Daily Mail, March 2014, at 1:15 p.m., on May 16, 2005, Pastor Louis LaMonica Jr. strolled into Detective Stan Carpenter's office in Livingston, Louisiana, and made his confession. What he had to say floored the detective. The pastor of Hosanna Church in nearby Hammond claimed he had performed satanic rituals, child abuse, and animal sacrifice in the church, and that he was not alone. He named his fellow perpetrators, and he named their child victims. It marked the beginning of the Hosanna Church scandal and exposed a vicious pedophile ring in a case whose shock waves reverberate in LaMonica's former parish of Tangipahoa to this day. October 8, 2014, Vice published a short documentary on the tragic events that transpired in the town of Ponchatoula, given the name The Real True Detective.
I would describe this case as being probably the most bizarre case that any normal small town sheriff's deputy or policeman or detective could ever imagine.
In 2014, Entertainment Weekly asked the creator of HBO's True Detective about the inspirations behind the show. He suggested Googling Satanism, preschool, and Louisiana. We did, and found that 10 years ago, a similar case involving an old church family and ritualistic child molestation landed on the desks of some Louisiana detectives. We just got down to Ponchatoula, Louisiana. It's a rural town here. People are super nice. It seems like a very religious town. But we've noticed, just talking to people in this town, that it's still very haunted. 10 years ago, there was a case involving some twisted sex crimes.
We have a lot of old families that have chosen to stay in our area, families that have been here forever and ever. We have a lot of Christian values here. You know, we have a lot of different church organizations. I would say that they were very heinous crimes. We would never expect anything like that in Ponchatoula because it's just not that kind of town.
The fact that there's still a church there, you know, blows my mind. I feel like that needs to be erased. That's where they should have built the Walmart that's in Ponchatoula, without a doubt.
People couldn't believe it, not in our community. You know, this doesn't happen, but it did.
So we're here to track down two of the detectives who solved that case.
My name's Don Wall. I'm an assistant district attorney in the 21st Judicial District. I was the lead prosecutor on the Hosanna Church case.
Is this something that you would have expected to see in this area of Louisiana?
On the child sexual abuse aspect of it, no, I was not surprised. We have a lot of child sexual abuse cases in this district. But the devil worship aspect of the case, it's the most disturbing things that I have ever read in my 30 years now as a prosecutor. I don't believe without the detectives' work that they did, and particularly the statements that they took from defendants, we couldn't have successfully prosecuted this case.
This Hosanna case was probably one of the darkest cases involving sexual abuse of children that I've ever seen in this state. And the sheriff called us detectives in to solve it. My name's Stuart Murphy. I work for the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office. I was a detective here for about 2 or 3 years.
What's the first thing that you remember about this case?
I was asked to come down to Hammond to interview somebody on a sex case with a child. You know, it turns out that they wanted me to come have some success talking to people and interviews. And I kind of thought it would be a 30 or 40 minute ordeal, and I didn't feel well. And I think I left the house and told my wife I'll be back in a couple of hours. It was kind of late at night. I think I might have went home 2 or 3 months later.
My name is Thomas Tedder. I'm a special agent with the FBI here in the Baton Rouge office. I've been with the Bureau for about 18 years. During the Hosanna Church case, I was working crimes against children. My first memories of the case, we had gotten a call from the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office. Louis LaMonica actually came in and confessed in mid-May, I believe, of 2005.
He just walked in off the street and decided to confess his sins, I think is how he might have put it.
It's unclear why Pastor LaMonica decided to turn himself in, but when he entered the sheriff's office, completely unprovoked, he detailed unthinkable child sex crimes he had orchestrated and committed within his church. Satanic rituals, child molestation, animal sacrifice, and bestiality were just some of the acts he confessed.
May 25th, 2005, 9 days after LaMonica's confession, the New York Times published an article introducing the public to the case. Ponchatoula, Louisiana, May 24th. 2 decades ago, Hosanna Church was one of the fastest growing congregations in the Cypress Flats of Tangipahoa Parish on Lake Pontchartrain's northwest rim, and its pastor, Louis LaMonica, was a beloved figure. That man could really preach, said Bill McCormick, a resident of Ponchatoula who attended the church as a boy. He was an awesome local icon. But by 2 years ago, when the church finally closed after a ferocious falling out between the pastor's son and successor Louis LaMonica Jr. and his family, the congregation that once neared 1,000 had dwindled to 10 or 15 troubled souls from a handful of families. And now, many of them, including Louis LaMonica Jr. and the deputy sheriff who once lived on the church grounds, are behind bars, accused by the police of a litany of ungodly offenses, including sexual abuse of perhaps 24 children and the mutilations of cats for satanic rituals. Eddie Robinson, assistant pastor at the 5,000-member Harvest World Outreach Ministries in nearby Hammond, to which many Hosanna members migrated, says what happened is clear. He told congregants on Sunday that a prophecy of witchcraft problems had been revealed in recent weeks. When the leadership of that church kept the enemy out, everything was fine, Mr. Robinson said. But when the leadership of that church let the enemy in, things began to change. The authorities, who got the first whiff of trouble 6 weeks ago when a woman, Nicole Bernard, 36, called the sheriff's office from Ohio to say she had fled the town to save her child from sexual abuse, are still trying to piece together what happened. 9 people have been arrested in the past week. Inside the shuttered church compound, in a youth hall behind the sanctuary, police found the faint imprint of pentagrams on the floor that someone had apparently tried to scrub away. Some of those arrested, the police said, described rituals within those pentagrams involving cat's blood and people dressed in black robes. According to police, the abuse victims ranged in age from 1 to 16. Several are in protective custody, and a search is underway for others who may have moved or are known to the police only by first name or nickname. On Tuesday, the police were at the church grounds with dogs, though they would not say what they sought. Sheriff Daniel H. Edwards of Tangipahoa said that as many as 25 children, about evenly split between boys and girls, might have been involved in sex acts at the youth center, in cars, and in the homes of at least 2 of those charged. LaMonica had written 260 pages of confession where he detailed explicit sexual acts committed against children in the name of Satan. Nicole Bernard, the woman who made the initial call to the police, was also arrested. Police in Ohio searched a storage unit and found soiled mattresses, dozens of videotapes, and 9 garbage bags full of costumes. Police in Louisiana confiscated 24 computers from the homes of the Hosanna congregants. All these computers contained child pornography. Police also found dozens of videotapes, hundreds of computer disks, and 8 large boxes of documents and photographs in the church offices. LaMonica, his wife, and 7 others were arrested and charged with the rape of a child and for acts against humanity for the apparent crime of bestiality. The abuse seems to have begun in 1999, he said, and stopped occurring on the church grounds after 2003. But nobody really believes they just stopped abusing kids, Sheriff Edwards said. Tangipahoa and surrounding parishes are fervently religious, and worshippers at other churches are wondering how something so troubling could have occurred. It has definitely affected my customers, said Diane Pepitone, owner of Heavenly Gifts Christian Bookstore. The general consensus is, if anything like this can happen in a place like Ponchatoula, with all the churches we have, it can happen anywhere. Ponchatoula was in the midst of its annual Strawberry Festival when Miss Bernard called the sheriff. She was reluctant to discuss specifics, the sheriff said. We'd call her and she'd say, "Oh, the dog's barking," or "Somebody's knocking on my door right now. I'll call you back." 2 weekends ago, she began to name names. The next day, the younger Louis LaMonica walked into the sheriff's office in neighboring Livingston Parish, where he lives, and he proceeded to describe all manner of sexual offenses. He didn't come to turn himself in. He came to talk with us, said Stan Carpenter, the detective supervisor in Livingston Parish. Mr. LaMonica, 45, matter-of-factly told them of having sex with at least 2 boys from the time they were 4 until they were 12 or 13, as well as having sex with a dog, Mr. Carpenter said, adding that Mr. LaMonica did not act as though he was confessing to crimes. He was just trying to be helpful. We didn't let him walk away, Mr. Carpenter said. He also named others at the church, including Christopher Labat, 24, the deputy sheriff of Tangipahoa Parish. Last Tuesday, Mr. Labat told detectives they would find child pornography on his home computer, Sheriff Edwards said, but denied taking part in any abuse. He was fired, charged and placed on suicide watch. Last Wednesday, 2 other church members, Austin Trey Bernard III, 36, and Alan R. Pearson, 46, were charged with aggravated rape of a juvenile. On Thursday, the former pastor's wife, Robin LaMonica, 45, was also arrested, along with Paul Fontenot, 21, another church member. Another parishioner, Lois Mowbray, 54, was accused of knowing about the abuse and not telling the authorities. And then Mr. Bernard's wife, Nicole, who had made the initial call to the police and who was Mr. Fontenot's sister, was arrested and charged with aggravated rape. Finally, on Monday night, Mr. Pearson's wife, Patricia, 54, was charged with sexual battery and being a principal in an aggravated rape. In Louisiana, the rape of a child is a capital offense. The elder Louis LaMonica began Hosanna with fewer than 24 congregants. By the 1970s, the church had nearly 1,000 members. The sanctuary rose along US 51 north of Ponchatoula Creek, and behind it, a school where a generation of youth studied. In 1984, Mr. LaMonica died. After some interim pastors, the church passed to the younger Mr. LaMonica in the mid-1990s. Strife followed. Many congregants drifted away, many to the Harvest World Outreach Ministries started by Hosanna's former youth minister. Mr. LaMonica did not respond well to the competition, former church members said. At one point, he moved to excommunicate anyone who merely visited another church. And he fought with his family, including his mother, the church's secretary, eventually ordering them out of the church. 2 years ago, in an incident the police are still investigating, some of those charged apparently made some sort of confession to other church members and sought forgiveness, causing a final exodus. The LaMonica family has been keeping a low profile, although one of the former pastor's sisters, Liz LaMonica Roberts, spoke to a New Orleans newspaper, the Times-Picayune. Her mother was devastated by the charges, she said, and had never reconciled with Mr. LaMonica, nor could they explain what had happened to him. Obviously, there's a screw loose, Miss Roberts told the newspaper. The church property sits empty, marked off with yellow police tape. A roadside sign, which once displayed Bible verses, bears crude graffiti sprayed in red paint. I went here K through 4, it reads. You let us down. Tim Normand, a retired contractor, lives just behind the church. I was sick, he said. I couldn't sleep when I heard what happened. But he was not entirely surprised, Mr. Normand said. He got along fine with the old preacher, but relations soured after the son took over. There were disputes over property lines. One night, he said, he heard a woman screaming that she'd beat the sins out of them, followed by hooting and hollering and other sounds. I'm a Catholic, Mr. Normand said. I got the heebie-jeebies. May 28, 2005, staff writers for the Times-Picayune of New Orleans published an interview with family of the accused pastor Louis LaMonica, providing a brief history of the family in an article with the title, Family of Accused Pastor Horrified by Rape Charges. As a boy, family members recalled Louis David LaMonica never cursed or smoked. He was called to serve the Lord, said his sister Liz LaMonica Roberts, and he wanted to be a preacher just like his daddy. So when the news broke that LaMonica, 45, and 7 other members of his church in Hammond were arrested for allegedly participating in or failing to report sex acts with children and animals, family members were horrified. It's not that LaMonica has been perfect over the years. To the contrary, family members said that he has been filled at times with anger as he pushed them out of his life and his church. But murder, his sister said, would be easier to accept than the aggravated rape charges facing her oldest brother, who became pastor of the Hosanna Church in 1993 and is now at the center of a growing investigation into what some are calling cult-like activities of the curious congregation. Some of the alleged activities include the sexual abuse of juveniles and animals, such as dogs and cats, according to police. Chief Charles Fitz, the director of investigations at the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office, said there may be as many as 24 victims, ranging in age from 1 to 20. A couple of jurisdictions received some information, Fitz said of the investigation that began more than a month ago, and as each began communicating a little bit and talking to some victims, several alleged victims, from there things started to develop. Monica's relatives said that they can't explain how the oldest son of a preacher, who wanted to be a preacher himself, ended up in a jail cell on charges that one relative called horrific. Obviously, there's a screw loose, Robert said of her brother. You can't be in your right mind. Roberts couldn't say much more about her brother, including what he's like these days. Family members said they haven't spoken with LaMonica in about 8 years. That's when they said their brother, whom they called David, ran them out of the church. It was a long way from where the family had started roughly 3 decades ago. Their father, the original Louis LaMonica, built the Hosanna Church in 1975, they recalled, in an attempt to accommodate a congregation that had grown from 12 to 900. The elder LaMonica is remembered as a magnetic and charismatic. He had a vision, said his daughter Roberts, and a plan that he called Taking Tangipahoa Parish for Jesus. People responded. You couldn't park nowhere around here, that man was so popular, said Gwen Normand, who lives with her husband Tim in a home behind the church. Family members said thousands of people came to his funeral in 1982 when he died at age 49 of stomach cancer. Change followed. The church split and the congregation dwindled to a couple hundred people by 1993. That's when she said the people voted in her brother Louis, a heavy equipment operator, as pastor. I really did feel like he was called, she said. He just always had a close relationship with God. He always felt as a child he would be a preacher. But soon, family members and neighbors said things began to change at the tin-roofed, brick-walled church on a 2-lane road between Hammond and Ponchatoula. Roberts said she felt anger around her brother and his wife Robin. Slowly, she explained, he pushed out his relatives, including his mother, who had served as secretary at the church. In the years that followed, the Normans noted increasingly strange happenings among their neighbors at the Hosanna Church. How they covered their windows with aluminum foil, how they came out at night making these Indian sounds, and how they generally bickered with the Normans over property rights. I went to hire a lawyer, and he said, "Y'all sound like the Hatfields and the McCoys," Tim Norman said. The problems continued, citing the mangy and sometimes crippled dogs that kept showing up around the church, and one incident that Norman described as sounding like an exorcism. She said she was going to whip the sin and beat the sin out of this guy. This new guy, said Tim Normand, recalling an exchange he overheard at the church one day. It's a cult, he added later, saying simply, they're bananas. The arrested include LaMonica of Holden on 2 counts of aggravated rape and 1 count of crime against nature, his wife Robin LaMonica, 45, on 1 count of aggravated rape of a juvenile under the age of 13, Christopher Labatt, 24, a Tangipahoa Parish Patrol Deputy, on 1 count of aggravated rape, Alan Pearson, 46, of Ponchatoula, on 1 count of aggravated rape. He listed the church as his home address. Austin Bernard III, 36, on 1 count of aggravated rape of a juvenile. He also lived in an apartment at the church, according to police. Nicole Bernard, also 36, with aggravated rape of a juvenile. She was married to Austin Bernard at one point and was arrested outside Columbus, Ohio on May 18th, 2 days after LaMonica turned himself in to authorities. Paul Fontenot, 21, of Ponchatoula, also charged with aggravated rape of a juvenile. Lois Ann Mowbray, 54, of Ponchatoula, was arrested May 19th and booked on obstruction of justice, failure to report a felony, and accessory after the fact to aggravated rape. Despite all these incidents, The Normans said they never suspected LaMonica and the others were up to anything like the allegations leveled by the authorities. For their part, authorities were careful about throwing around words like cult. Meanwhile, the LaMonica family is moving on with both broken and hardened hearts. Broken, they said, because of what these allegations have done to their father's good name in the community, and hardened by the knowledge that they lost Louis LaMonica long ago. Last year, Robert said, they heard he had suffered what she referred to as a nervous breakdown. Their mother tried at that point to reach out to him, she recalled. LaMonica turned her away, going so far as to seek a restraining order against her. Now, Robert said, their mother is mourning, like it's a death. In the aforementioned Daily Mail article, Major Carpenter, 62, recalled, LaMonica walked into my office and sat down, just as calm as you and me talking now. I was detective supervisor at the time. When he came in, he basically thought that after he told us what he did, he was just going to go on about his business of the day. Listening to him, here where we're all Christian, it kind of floored me. You're talking about a man who professes to be a preacher, a pastor, and a church leader, abusing children and worshiping Satan. I'm an old guy. I'm coming up to retire in a couple of years. I thought I'd seen it all. Sometimes I reckon you have seen it all, only in different ways. And something like this happens. It stays with you. In his confession, LaMonica sat down and announced, I want to talk about the dedication to Satan of a baby. It was held at the church, upstairs, in what was called the youth room. He went on to describe a room where all the windows are covered in black, like black paper. Keep it dark. There was a pentagram in the middle of the floor, he said, and a book of spells and temptations. On this occasion, he claimed, there were 5 others present. Austin Trey Bernard III, then 36, LaMonica's wife Robin, 45, church member Paul Fontenot, 21, Sheriff's Deputy Chris Labatt, 24, and Patricia Trish Pearson, 56. All but Labatt later pled guilty to charges ranging from aggravated rape, sexual battery, to obstruction of justice. Labatt was charged with child pornography, but the charges were subsequently dismissed. LaMonica stated, they would start off like a church service, but it was satanic music. There were candles burning, dark red candle holders. The dedication of a baby to Satan with this pentagram. She was put in the middle in a black dress. He described chanting around the child, Ray Bernard's daughter, barely 1 year old at the time, before killing a cat, draining its blood, and each drinking it. He claimed they did not make the child drink because she was too young, and instead took off her dress and sprinkled the blood over her infant body. These meetings, according to LaMonica, took place once every 2 to 3 months. On other occasions, certain girls would be picked up to have sexual relationships with. The guys would line up, one by one. They would come and they would have sex with that girl. And the same if there was a woman. They would have a homosexual relationship and oral sex, acting like one was a man and one was a woman. He claimed that there was feces laid around. There was urine. And he claimed that during these satanic rituals, he would become distorted by the devil, and that demons would change him into an animal, a snake, a fox, wolf, spiders. In the Hosanna Church case, there was talk of animal masks, hoods, and gowns. Each member of this pedophile ring had a nickname, he claimed. Trish Pearson was bluey black, after the colors on the spell book she carried. He called his own wife Robin, the lady, because she was an organizer and made sure stuff goes right. Trey was the mastermind, and LaMonica himself was chief. LaMonica stated that the secret ceremonies had started in 1999 and carried on to 2003, when he and his wife separated and he moved out of the church building. Bernard's wife, Nicole, left Bernard and took their daughter with her to Ohio. 2 days before LaMonica walked into Major Carpenter's office, Nicole had telephoned Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff Daniel Edwards, the man initially tasked with investigating the crimes that had taken place in his jurisdiction with similar allegations. The news quickly broke in this small, deeply religious stretch of Louisiana. The church had a strong legacy in the area. LaMonica's father, Louis LaMonica Sr., founded it and was a respected and much-loved pastor. The church had thrived for more than 20 years. LaMonica's claim that the church had converted to Satanism in 2000 was profoundly, indescribably shocking. The building that had once been the heart of a community became a dark void at its center. It became a crime scene. Sheriff Edwards announced that there could be as many as 25 victims. A bond of trust had been irrevocably broken. Here, after all, with a ring including not only a man of the cloth, but a man of the law, too. For Steve Brown, a former church member who testified at trial, it suddenly made sense of Sheriff Deputy Chris Labatt's inaction when he went to him with concerns about claims Bernard had made to him. Bernard had confessed to abusing his child, according to Brown's testimony, but when he told Labatt, the deputy claimed he couldn't do anything without physical evidence. When Bernard shared a notebook in which he wrote of the abuse, Brown took the writing he described as stomach-churning to Labatt and was left wondering why nothing came of it. It did not occur to him that the gun-toting lawman was himself one of the group, which Bernard later referred to as perverted musketeers, one for all and all for one. One by one, the church members named by LaMonica were rounded up and interrogated. With each interview, claims became more shocking. Bestiality was added to the already sickening mix, as Bernard, and later LaMonica's own sons, claimed that he had sex with the family's dog. When he was distorted by the devil, LaMonica claimed he would lust for animals, so he would subsequently have sex with the family's pet poodle in the pentagram drawn on the floor. He would also force his sons to have sex with the dog in front of the other worshippers, a form of sadistic torture which happens to resurface in various other networks of abuse, even described by victims of the Dutroux network such as Regina Louf in the horrifying X dossier. Bernard had already confessed to raping his own daughter since she was only 2 months old. He was the first of the Hosanna Church accused to be convicted of abuse. During the trial, federal agents graphically described the abuse, which was reported on in a local newspaper, Daily Star, in Hammond, Louisiana. Based on the report published Friday, November 30th, 2007, an agent testified Thursday that Trey Bernard said in an interview that when he first began changing his infant daughter's diapers, his hands would start shaking. Bernard said he knew he would likely lose control, and he did. Special Agent Joseph Edwards testified. Edwards was a witness for the prosecution in the trial of Austin Trey Bernard III, 39, of Hammond. Bernard is charged with the aggravated rape of a 2-year-old girl, his daughter, in the Hosanna Church child sex case. The now-defunct church was located off US 51 between Hammond and Ponchatoula and was the site of alleged occult activities and child sex. Edwards was the 5th witness called by the prosecution since testimony in the trial began Tuesday. In an interview with Bernard at the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office substation on June 10, 2005, Edwards said he was told by Bernard that during the diaper changes, he began touching his infant daughter. The touching became oral sex and eventually penetration. Edwards said Bernard claimed to have been molested as a child, which led him to molest children. Federal prosecutor Lisa Marie Freitas, now with the Child Exploitation Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, was a special agent assigned to the FBI's New Orleans office in 2005. Freitas testified that she too interviewed Bernard, who told her that he had done with his daughter everything a human could do to the body of another human. Much of the abuse occurred while his wife, Nicole Bernard, was working. She said Bernard told her that he was the first to penetrate his daughter, and Louis LaMonica was the second. She said Bernard described the rituals at the church, although the rituals were not the point of the FBI investigation. Frida said he volunteered the information. According to Bernard, the rituals took place in what was called the room, which was the church's youth room. He described how 6 adults would line up shoulder to shoulder and perform sex acts on his daughter or other children who were passed down the line. He claimed the rule was that there would be no penetration or injury. The rituals had a satanic theme, including a pentagram, the use of animals and animal parts such as chicken feet, and the use of animal blood. Frida said that according to Bernard, Patricia Pearson and Robin LaMonica, 2 defendants in the case, put animal blood on his daughter during one of the rites. She said Bernard claimed Pearson and LaMonica also sexually abused his daughter. He said animal blood was also put on other children. She said she and the other FBI agents got a search warrant for the church. Bernard served as a guide, pointing out what the different rooms and areas were used for. Frida said nothing was in the sanctuary. No pews, no chairs, just a large, empty room. The youth room was pitch black when the lights were out, she said. The room was equipped with a black light. When Bernard turned it on, the light revealed writings on the walls from ceiling to floor. Every inch from top to bottom was writing. Writing consisted of songs, lyrics, and biblical verses. Some of the words were inverted or changed. According to Prosecutor Freitas, using a special chemical, the search team found signs of body fluids all over the carpet. Pieces of the carpet with fluid spots were cut out for evidence. Freitas testified that federal search warrants were issued for the residence of Chris Labat, one of the 7 defendants. Agents met with sheriff's deputies to execute the warrant because Labat was a deputy. The search provided several pieces of evidence, including a computer, nothing that related directly to Bernard. An interview with Louis LaMonica, another defendant in the case, along with his comments to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, pointed to a church group. Law enforcement agents then began making arrests. LaMonica, the former pastor of Hosanna Church, turned himself in to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office before Bernard's arrest. Tangipahoa Parish Detective Mike DePhillip said authorities learned on May 19, 2005, Bernard was allegedly involved with the Hosanna group. But according to DePhillips, Bernard wanted to speak with FBI agents because some have a background in psychology. The interview took place June 10, 2005 at the sheriff's substation in Hammond. Freitas and Edwards said Bernard was fully informed of his rights and was advised that he had the right to an attorney. He declined the offer of an attorney and signed the federal form showing he had been advised of his rights. The interview was not taped because agents did not have permission from the regional FBI office to use a tape recorder or video device. The first thing he wanted to know was why things happen the way they do, Freitas told the court. Agents told him they only wanted to know what he had witnessed. Bernard said, "Things just happen that way." She said he had claimed to have been sexually abused as a child by his mother. He said he and his wife Nicole had a Christian background and he had felt she could keep him straight. But he said he had been in a homosexual relationship with Louis LaMonica. Freitas said that according to Bernard, the group started under the leadership of LaMonica. LaMonica had full control at the church, and it was not long before most members left, including the youth pastor. Bernard replaced him. She said it was Bernard's job to bring the young people to a certain level of sexual behavior and to gauge how they reacted to sexual contact by an adult. About 10 children were in the youth group. Bernard told the interviewers that the LaMonica's 2 sons had been sexually abused by their father from a very young age. Their parents had trained them to lie, and they were very good at it, Freitas said, quoting Bernard. She said she does not feel Bernard sought counseling from anyone outside the church. According to Bernard, Lois Mowbray was a member of the church who learned of the sexual abuse but did not report it. Bernard claimed the group used no alcohol or drugs. He also said he last abused his daughter about 2 years before his arrest. Special Agent Edwards said Bernard thinks Mowbray told him to make a written account of all that had happened. That account, Bernard's diary, was given to the jury for review. It is graphic and detailed as to some of the incidents. The jury also heard the taped interview conducted with Bernard by sheriff's detectives Phillips and Stuart Murphy shortly after his arrest. By the time the case reached Amite Courthouse, Louisiana, in the summer of 2008, the satanic cult angle to the case was almost entirely abandoned. Investigative journalist Deborah Hastings explains in an article published in the AP August 7, 2009. There were times when prosecutor Don Wall, a man not easily shocked, simply closed the file and stopped reading. He knew he had the makings of a very good case, not the least of which were volumes of written confessions. But page after page, filled with ungodly details, burned his eyes and seared his soul. Looking at them made him bone-weary. I could only read about 15 pages at a time, said Wall, Assistant District Attorney of Louisiana's rural Tangipahoa Parish, north of New Orleans. It just really wore on me. It just made me tired. Of all the bizarre tales of ritualistic child abuse accompanied by sacrifices and group sex, Wall's case stands alone. His was proven in court. It is a story of sexual hedonism in a house of worship, some of it perpetrated by parents against their own children. Former pastor Louis LaMonica was sentenced last year to 4 concurrent life terms for having sex with his own 2 sons. Another church member was sentenced to 3 life sentences for systematically abusing his daughter until she was 5. A third pled guilty to sexual battery of the same girl and received a 10-year sentence. A 4th awaits trial. I had the McMartin, California preschool scandal thrown in my face a lot during all this, Wall said. That's the main reason I kept this devil-worshipping stuff to a small portion of the trial. Worshipping the devil is not illegal. Child molestation is. That's what I focused on. In excruciating detail, the ex-leader of Hosanna Church in tiny Ponchatoula on the northwest bank of Lake Pontchartrain wrote in a journal how he and others stood shoulder to shoulder in the youth hall, passing children to each other, committing every imaginable sex act upon them. Everybody got a turn, LaMonica said. It was like nobody missed out, including the women. The Hosanna faithful, once a thriving congregation, had dwindled to a dozen or so families over the past decade. They abandoned their First Assembly of God affiliation and whitewashed the windows of its sanctuary and school. Behind the glass, members abused children from infants to toddlers and beyond. Splattered animal blood and dabbled in devil worship, LaMonica and others set down in thick journals written in hopes of forgiveness. Books were later seized by sheriff's deputies. The investigation started in 2005 when LaMonica made the trip to his local sheriff in nearby Livingston Parish. Settling in a chair, he matter-of-factly ticked off a list of offenses committed by himself and others in his flock. Anal, oral, and vaginal sex with children, sexual acts with a dog, wiping victims with cat blood. After spending 2 hours being videotaped by detectives, LaMonica stood to go. He hoped for a plea deal, he said. He was arrested and held without bail until trial. Meanwhile, deputies searched the church, his home, and the homes of others. They found LaMonica's 260-page confessional, others written pleas for atonement, and a faded pentagram on the youth hall floor. The admitted sins covered about 4 years, beginning in 1999, and involved several children, some of whom were now grown. Working with the FBI, investigators spoke to the oldest alleged victims. None claimed they were abused. I interviewed one young man. He had tears running down his cheeks. But he said nothing happened. Paul recounted. I don't think the older ones wanted to get involved. They'd seen the firestorm in the media. Who wants to get calls from reporters saying, "What happened to you?" In a very strange turn of events, the trial, LaMonica recanted his confessions, saying he'd been coerced by the church's new pastor. Jurors didn't believe it, nor did they accept the testimony of his sons, who said they lied about being abused as children, but had earlier been interviewed on videotape, telling a series of therapists and agents about childhoods in which sex with their father was ever present. The Daily Mail article points out the fact that LaMonica's sons had given graphic accounts of long-term abuse at the hands of their father and Bernard, with whom it emerged LaMonica was engaged in a homosexual relationship. They also described occasions in which they were subjected to various abuses as they were passed between their father, Bernard, and Paul Fontenot. At times they had claimed their mother and Trish Pearson were also present. Defender Michael Teal came up with an altogether more bizarre account in which he cast his client as the victim of a Christian cult led by a preacher named Lois Mowbray, then 54. He alleged that this false prophet had taken over and driven all but a small number of worshippers from Hosanna Church, and that this became her cult, isolated and obsessed by her notion of cleansing and generational curse, which rendered all guilty of the sins of their forefathers, and altar calls, in which members of the congregation were called to publicly confess their sins so that she could cleanse them of their demons. At the end of these ceremonies, cleansed had to vomit out their demons. Mr. Teal claimed that she was a charismatic leader who had brainwashed his client and family into making false confessions. There was something cult, evil, and sinister going on at the church, Mr. Teal told the court in his opening statement, and that evil, sinister presence was personified by a self-proclaimed prophet, a person who professes to have a direct connection to God, a person who likened herself to be the second Moses, someone who was destined to lead Tangipahoa Parish out of Egypt and away from pharaohs, and supposed prophet used her claimed connection to God to manipulate, coerce, control, and exert authority and power. Mowbray was arrested for failure to report child abuse. Although this is not a crime in Louisiana if you're a pastor, she was not officially qualified as such. Charges against her were dropped. She had instructed LaMonica to write down his sins in order to cleanse himself through confession. This, rather than going to the authorities, was her reaction to his tales of violently abusing his sons. LaMonica claimed his confession was false and forced. His sons recanted their own accounts on the stand. After discovering this strange, confusing wrinkle to our story, I felt compelled to briefly read through the facts put forward in the State v. LaMonica rehearing, which was ultimately denied August 18, 2010 in the Louisiana First Circuit Court of Appeals. It's important to at least expose ourselves to the allegations made by LaMonica's defense throughout the appeal process, despite the difficult prospect of determining the credibility of a man who has been convicted of such heinous crimes, if only to provide further context to our story. In the late 1990s, Lois Mowbray became associate pastor of Hosanna Church, and in 2001, she became co-pastor of the church. By 2003, the defendant's involvement in the church, including his involvement as a preacher, declined considerably. Lois, along with her husband, Jesse Mowbray, and Robin LaMonica, began handling the finances of the church. According to the defendant, Lois began to take over as the person running the church. In 2002, the defendant, Louis LaMonica, and his wife, Robin LaMonica, began having marital problems. In March of 2003, the defendant separated from Robin and began living at the church. For the next 2 years, the defendant lived at the church. In 2002 or 2003, Dr. Milton Anderson, a psychiatrist, began treating LaMonica's 2 sons who will be referred to by the initials ML and SL. Dr. Anderson saw the boys on a regular basis for medication management and general supportive therapy. Both boys had ADHD, anxiety, and Tourette's syndrome. In March 2005, Robin LaMonica contacted Dr. Anderson and told him it was urgent that he see the boys. Over the course of 2 sessions, ML and SL revealed to Dr. Anderson that for years they had been forced to have sex with adults, a very young girl referred to in the court documents as AB, and each other. SL also had a stack of pictures he had drawn, graphically illustrating the abuse he and his brother had suffered. According to ML and SL, they were threatened by church member Nicole Bernard and disclosed to Dr. Anderson all of the sexual incidents in which they were involved. As a result of these sessions, Dr. Anderson contacted Child Protective Services. According to Thomas Tedder, an FBI special agent working on the case, when the defendant and Bernard, as well as some other adult church members, began living at the church, there were no longer any church services, and the building had, in effect, ceased functioning as a church. Nicole Bernard was the mother of A.B. and the wife of Trey Bernard, who was also living at the church because of marital problems. In late March 2005, Dr. Adrian Atzimus, a pediatric forensic medicine specialist, saw ML and SL for therapy. Dr. Atzimus also performed a full physical examination on each boy. Dr. Atzimus testified at trial that ML and SL told her that they were forced to perform sexual acts on the defendant and others. ML said he had oral and anal sex with the defendant at home and at the church. SL also said he had oral and anal sex with the defendant. In April 2005, Jennifer Thomas, a forensic interviewer with the Child Advocacy Center, CAC, interviewed ML and SL in Hammond. At trial, Thomas indicated that ML was 18 years old when he was interviewed, and as such, his interview could not be used in court. The videotaped interview of SL, who was almost 15 years old at the time, was played for the jury. In the interview, SL listed at least half a dozen adult church members, including the defendant, who took part in the sexual abuse. According to SL, sexual incidents occurred at his house, Bernard's house, and the church. SL told Thomas that he also had sex with a dog and with AB, who was about 1 year old. SL and Thomas also went over SL's drawings of various sexual acts involving certain people, including himself, ML, and the defendant. SL indicated to Thomas that some of his drawings depicted actual events, while other drawings were products of his imagination or based on what he and the defendant talked about. According to SL, of about 55 drawings, approximately 22 of them depicted actual events involving sex. In July and August 2005, SL had several therapy sessions with Dr. Allison McCain, a clinical psychologist. Dr. McCain testified at trial that she found SL to have a lot of depression, some anxiety and guilt, and feelings of worthlessness. SL told Dr. McCain that he tried to cope with his feelings with distraction and repression. SL told Dr. McCain that he had been using these coping mechanisms for years to try to not think about the molestation. SL also indicated that after his parents separated, the molestation stopped. In May 2005, the defendant walked into the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office and asked to speak to Detective Bonita Sager. In a taped interview with Detective Sager, the defendant confessed to raping his sons. The defendant stated that at his home in Springfield, Livingston Parish, he performed oral sex on ML when he was 4 or 5 years old. The defendant began having anal sex with both ML and SL when they were 5 or 6 years old. The defendant further indicated that sexual activity involving several people, including A.B., occurred at Hosanna Church. Based on this information, Detective Sager contacted the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office. Detective Reginald Bryant with the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's Office met with Detective Sager in Livingston Parish, and Detective Sager interviewed the defendant for a second time on the same day. In this second interview, the defendant provided detailed accounts of various sexual encounters at the church. He described orgies at the church involving his sons, A.B., and teenaged members of the church, all having sex with several adult members of the church, including the defendant. The defendant then stated that most of the time he had sex with his sons at home, but that he had sex with them at the church as well. The defendant did not mention Lois Mowbray in either of his statements to the police. Police searched the defendant's house and found a notebook containing writings, handwritten by the defendant, Louis LaMonica, ostensibly in 2004. These pages detailed the repeated instances of his orally and anally raping M.L. and S.L. The defendant wrote about having sex with his dog, forcing his sons to have sex with each other, and raping S.L. starting from the age of 3 up until the age of 12. The defendant wrote that he used money, toys, threats, and physical abuse to control and rape his sons. In late 2005, Dr. Angela Mayfield, owner of the New Beginnings Behavioral Health Care in Hammond, began counseling S.L. S.L. told Dr. Mayfield that his father, mother, and other people at church sexually molested him. The defendant and his wife, Robin LaMonica, were in jail when S.L. was being treated by Dr. Mayfield, so S.L. lived with his grandmother, the defendant, Louis LaMonica's mother. Dr. Mayfield testified at trial that within 2 months of moving in with his grandmother, S.L. changed his account of his being sexually abused. S.L. told Dr. Mayfield that he made up all of the allegations of abuse, and that someone at the church had forced him to say that he was abused and molested. Dr. Mayfield testified that in late 2005 or early 2006, S.L. said he made it all up, that despite his recantation, he continued to treat him until September 2007 because he still had problems. Dr. Mayfield testified that after S.L. recanted, he still had the symptoms that were consistent with his history of sexual abuse. Dr. Mayfield felt S.L.'s symptoms, in fact, got worse, and S.L. began using illegal drugs. M.L. and S.L. testified at trial. They both had written about the sexual abuse that occurred, and S.L. had drawn pictures of the abuse. They both claimed at trial, however, that the sexual abuse had never occurred, and that they were actually forced by Nicole Bernard to make these false allegations. They also both claimed that all of the allegations of sexual abuse they had written about were not true, and that their mother told them what to write. M.L. stated that Nicole Bernard also told him what to write. S.L. stated that Lois Mowbray had told him what to write as well, and also to draw the pictures. M.L. explained that Nicole Bernard told him that if he did not come forward with the allegations of sexual abuse, including the abuse to her daughter, A.B., Nicole Bernard would press charges against him and he would go to jail. The defendant, Louis LaMonica, testified at trial that none of the sexual allegations he had confessed to or written about were true. He testified that when he was the pastor of the church, he made Lois Mowbray his spiritual advisor, that Robin LaMonica and Lois were very close, and that they were close to Nicole Bernard. He believed that Lois was a prophet and spoke to God. The defendant claimed that he made these false confessions because Lois had control over him and forced him to speak and write about things he never actually did, but may have thought about. According to the defendant, the notion of spiritual thought, preached by Lois, meant that if you think something, then it happened. The defendant claimed that Robin LaMonica also made him write about sexual acts that never occurred, and that if he did not write as instructed, she would divorce him, and he would never see his sons. In his testimony, the defendant suggested that Lois made him remain at the church and work very long hours each day with little sleep at Integrity Electric, a business operating within the church. After his wife forced him to move into the church in 2003, LaMonica testified his wife told him to work for the electrical company owned by Mowbray and other church members for $10 a day, or she would divorce him and take his sons away. I really don't want a divorce, LaMonica testified. I really want to work this out. After working 10-hour days installing wiring, he also had to do work cleaning the church. LaMonica would work around the church doing chores, such as scrubbing doors and toilets with toothbrushes, he testified. He was told the money he earned was being sent to his family. He claimed that the room in which he was staying inside the church was locked at night from the outside with padlocks to ensure he was locked in. For a while, he had to wear a dress and 2 rubber snakes representing his mother and aunt because they were pharaohs. Church members once shaved his head and called him Pharaoh as well. His wife, Robin LaMonica, allegedly saw the defendant dressed this way, and it made him feel very small. Lois Mowbray had convinced herself she was like Moses, and Tangipoa was coming out of Egypt, referring to the biblical story of Moses leading the Jewish people out of slavery in Egypt. Pharaoh was blocking the way. In addition to suffering humiliation, LaMonica was often beaten by other church members, or the other church members would pace around him while cursing him in the name of God. In my search to substantiate some of LaMonica's claims, I discovered that 2 young women, Karen Boucher and Desiree Loke, had testified that their membership in the Hosanna youth group was solely about worshiping God. They testified they never saw any satanic symbols or rituals at the church, even though they had been named as participants by some of the suspects and LaMonica's sons. Both women said they never had sex with LaMonica or any of the other church members. Instead, they described what they referred to as a Christian cult. Once Lois Mowbray became Hosanna's associate pastor, sermons ended and Sunday worship services varied from praising God for many hours to altar calls, where Mowbray claimed God had told her of a sin that a congregant had to confess publicly, Boucher and Loke said. Loke's break with the church came after she told her boyfriend, Christopher Labat, that she was tired of Labat's practice of confessing every aspect of their personal relationship to Mowbray. Labat, 27 of Hammond, is the former Tangipoa Parish Sheriff's deputy who faces child rape charges in this case. 6 months later, Loke, 23 of Hammond, said she hung out with Labat for a couple of hours. The next day, Labat, after confessing his visit to Mowbray, arrived at her place of employment and pulled her aside, she testified. Labat then cut off the head of a rubber snake and handed the head to her, Loke tearfully related. He told me it was me. In 2003, LaMonica testified he was told to make a written confession about every woman he had lusted after in his lifetime. I was told to write, so that is what I wrote, LaMonica said. Figured that was it. In 2004, LaMonica testified he was approached again to write about raping his sons. By this time, the torture and sleep deprivation had stopped, but he was still not allowed to go home to his wife. The only way to get out of this thing is to keep writing, I thought. What's it going to hurt? They're going to burn it. LaMonica testified that in May 2005, only days after LaMonica's wife helped him get an apartment in Natalbany, church members began pressuring him to go to the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office and confess to taking part in a child sex cult. He was told to ask for a deal in exchange for information and that he would not be arrested. What it came down to is I wanted to go home, LaMonica said. My only avenue home was through Lois Mowbray. I had to do whatever she told me to do. On cross-examination, Wall had LaMonica repeat some of his previous explanations of why he confessed and pressed the defendant for reasons why he allowed others to force him to do things. Paul asked LaMonica why he didn't leave a church where members repeatedly accused him of stealing money and molesting his children. "And you just took that?" Paul asked. "Yes, I did, and we're here today because of it," LaMonica said. LaMonica is currently serving 4 life sentences to run concurrently. He has had a petition to appeal denied. Bernard received 3 consecutive life sentences, and according to investigative journalist Laura Collins, today, there is still a church on the site, the Christian Life Assembly of God, under the leadership of Reverend Gary Yates. In the aftermath of the scandal, there were calls to raise Hosanna Church. One company wanted to buy it, bulldoze it, and build a hospital on the site. But ultimately, Hurricane Katrina saved anyone the trouble of gutting the building so associated with shame and scandal, and it was cleared out not by a contractor, but by an act of God. Unfortunately, we are left with many more questions than answers when it comes to the complicated story of the Hosanna Church scandal. However, the fundamental facts of the case clearly contributed to the ongoing list of satanic ritual abuse allegations, while simultaneously providing the inspiration for the captivating plotline of True Detective Season 1. Throughout the course of my research, I happened to encounter another case providing us with an additional example of strange synchronicities regarding the original victim in the opening scenes of True Detective, and a true-to-life representation of the unique set of circumstances discovered at the fictional crime scene, seemingly duplicated in what looks to have been a near copycat imitation crime conducted in real life in Delphi, Indiana, February 13, 2017. In the first episode of True Detective, the initial victim's body was found in a sugarcane field. Her corpse had been staged against a tree as if in prayer, with her head crowned with deer antlers and her body surrounded by twig lattice works, closely resembling Cajun bird traps. A disturbing and cryptic triangular crooked spiral symbol carved into the back of the murder victim happens to be the exact symbol used by pedophiles to indicate their preference in little boys. And according to the FBI, this symbol is known as the Little Boy Lover logo. The tragic murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German share shocking similarities to that of the aforementioned fictional crime scene. Their bodies were discovered near the Monon High Bridge Trail, part of the Delphi Historic Trails, after the girls had disappeared from that trail the previous day. The murders received extensive media coverage, in part due to video and audio recordings released by law enforcement that came from German's smartphone, which recorded an individual believed to be the killer. Fox 59 released a timeline of the disappearance and deaths of Liberty German and Abigail Williams in Delphi. According to the timeline, at 1:35 p.m. on February 13, 2017, 13-year-old Abigail Joyce Williams and 14-year-old Liberty Rose Lynn German were dropped off by German's older sister, Kelsey German, on County Road 300 North, east of the Hoosier Heartland Highway. The girls were hiking on the Monon High Bridge over Deer Creek, among woodland in remote Deer Creek Township. At 2:07 p.m., German posted a photo of Williams walking the bridge. After this, they were never heard from again. They were reported missing at 5:30 p.m. after they had failed to meet German's father at 3:15. The families initially searched for the girls themselves before calling the police. Authorities who quickly searched the area did not initially suspect foul play in the disappearance. This would change when the bodies of the girls were found around noon the next day, about half a mile east of the abandoned Monon High Bridge. The bodies were found on the north bank of Deer Creek. Police did not initially release details of how the girls were murdered. As early as February 15, 2017, Indiana State Police began circulating a still image of an individual reportedly seen on the Monon High Bridge Trail, near where the two friends were slain. The grainy photograph appears to capture a Caucasian male, hands in pockets, head down, walking on the rail bridge towards the girls. A few days later, the person in the photograph, dubbed the bridge guy, was named the prime suspect in the double homicide. On February 22nd, law enforcement released an audio recording during which the voice of the suspect, although muffled, is heard to say, "Down the hill." At this news conference, officials credited the source of the audio and imagery to German's smartphone, and further regarded her as a hero for having had the presence of mind and fortitude to secretly record the exchange. Police indicated that additional evidence from the phone had been secured, but would not release further details so as not to compromise any future trial. On July 17th, police distributed a composite sketch of someone sought as a person of prime interest in the murders. The sketch was apparently created from eyewitness accounts of a hiker on the Delphi historic trails the day the girls vanished. On April 22, 2019, Indiana State Police announced a new direction in the case and released a new sketch of the suspect that looked entirely different than the original. While urging the public to look at the new sketch, listen to the audio, watch how the man walks on the bridge, and send tips to the tip line email. An additional plea was made for help in identifying the driver of a vehicle left abandoned off the Hoosier-Heartland Highway in Delphi at the former Child Services office between noon and 5 p.m. on the day of the murders. A report in the Independent explains that 5 years after the murders took place, in September 2022, investigators reviewed a misfiled tip after a volunteer file clerk discovered the error. In the tip, a man by the name of Richard Allen had self-reported 3 days after the murders to being on the trails on the day of the murders and reported seeing both Williams and German. On October 26, 2022, Richard Allen was taken into custody and appeared in court on October 28th. 4 days later, on October 31st, Indiana State Police announced that Allen had been charged with 2 counts of murder in the case. He had pled not guilty. His trial, originally scheduled to start March 20th, 2023, was postponed to allow the defense team to review discovery materials. On November 29, 2022, Judge Francis Gohl issued an order to unseal the probable cause affidavit that led to Allen's arrest. According to the redacted document, video footage recovered from German's phone showed one of the victims mentioning "gun" as a man wearing a dark jacket and jeans approached them and ordered them to go down the hill. Investigators believe Allen is the man seen in the video. Investigators also happened to find a .40 caliber unspent round less than 2 feet from one victim's body, but between the 2 victims. It was later determined that the round came from a gun owned by Allen. A witness said she saw a man walking away from the bridge wearing a blue-colored jacket and blue jeans and was muddy and bloody. Another witness and a tip mentioned that a car was parked oddly and appeared to be parked in a way as if to hide its license plate. Investigators said the description of the vehicle matched a vehicle that Allen owned in 2017. WTVD-TV Rally reported that shortly after his arrest, Allen told authorities that he was at his mother's house in nearby Peru, Indiana, while his wife was working. Allen estimated that he left the house around 11:15 a.m. and arrived on the Monon High Trail around an hour later. Allen said that he saw 3 girls passing by on the trail, before stating that he did not see anybody else afterward. Allen said he then went on his phone to watch the stocks ticker while walking on the trail before deciding he could not find his black 2016 Ford Focus on the trail property. After finding his vehicle and driving back to his mother's Peru home, Allen said he continued to watch the stocks. Afterward, Allen said that he told his wife that he was on the trail the day the girls went missing. His wife mentioned that the police were looking to talk to people who may have information, so he said he went to the sheriff's office and spoke with the Department of Natural Resources officer only days after the 2 girls were killed. In October of 2023, Judge Gohl removed the defense attorneys citing gross negligence due to crime scene photos being leaked from their office. The attorney's removal was appealed to the Indiana Supreme Court, in which the justices of the Indiana Supreme Court reinstated the defense attorneys to the case. The trial began on October 18, 2024, in Delphi. During the trial, prosecutors stated both girls had their throats cut. Williams was found fully clothed, whereas German was discovered nude. An unspent .40 caliber bullet from Allen's gun was conveniently found between the bodies. Prosecutors said that Allen had admitted to the murders more than 60 times while incarcerated, confessing to his wife, his mother, family members, the prison warden, the psychologist who treated him in prison, other prison employees, and other inmates. The confessions were made in person, over the phone, and in writing. Prosecutors told the jury that Allen was the bridge guy, after showing them a digitally enhanced 43-second version of the cell phone video recorded by German, a state police master trooper who had listened to more than 700 of Allen's prison phone calls, testified that the voice of the bridge guy is the voice of Richard Allen. The jury, which had been sequestered during the trial, began deliberations on November 7th. On November 11th, 2024, Allen was convicted on all counts. His sentencing date was set for later this month on December 20th. With the limited information provided thus far, one could easily misinterpret this as a clear-cut example of an open and shut case. That is, until you become aware of the bombshell claims made by not only the accused Richard Allen and his defense attorneys, but also prominent federal investigators working the case. Local News 13, WTHR Indianapolis, reported in July of 2022 that an FBI agent believed clothing taken and bodies staged in Delphi murders search warrant request. Earlier in the Delphi murders investigation, FBI Special Agent Nicole Robertson believed a possible suspect in 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German's deaths lived at a property near where the bodies were found. Court documents detail a search warrant request made March 17, 2017. The request is to search the home of Ronald Logan, which is 1,400 feet from where the bodies of Williams and German were found. In citing reasons for the search warrant, Agent Robertson noted that pieces of clothing from one of the victims were missing, and that it appeared the girls' bodies were moved and staged. There were no visible signs of a struggle or fight. Agent suspected a souvenir had been taken by the killer, and that it was common for perpetrators to memorialize the crime scene with pictures. Agent Robertson also said investigators recovered fibers and unidentified hairs at the crime scene. She also noted that 77-year-old Logan appeared to be in good physical condition, and his voice was not inconsistent with that of the voice captured on German's phone. The agent also confirmed that video on German's phone was actually 43 seconds long. The FBI agent notes an interview with Logan's relative in which the relative tells the agent that Logan called them the morning of February 14, 2017, and asked them to lie about where he had been the previous afternoon. This was prior to the bodies being discovered. Logan allegedly asked the relative to say they drove to a Lafayette aquarium store at a time that matched when Williams and German went missing around 2 p.m. A receipt found in Logan's home showed a checkout time of 5:21 p.m., and the FBI agent noted the store was approximately 30 minutes from Logan's home. The agent said Logan's statements about his whereabouts were found to be factually false and intentionally designed to deceive law enforcement officers. The FBI agent also said the relative believed the original image of the suspect looked like Logan. A woman who had been in a relationship with Logan years earlier told law enforcement that Logan had been physically abusive, threatened that he could kill her and no one would find her body, and that Logan carried a gun with him everywhere he went in a fanny pack. She told the agent that when she first saw the image of the suspect, she thought it was Logan. Another woman who had been in a relationship with Logan told law enforcement that when she heard the bodies were found near Logan's home, She believed he was involved. The FBI agent noted that a search of a tip database about a month after the murders had 15 tips connecting Logan to the murders. The FBI agent also claimed that text messages sent to and from Logan's phone the evening of February 13, 2017, showed he was likely outside his home and in the proximity of where Libby and Abby's bodies were located. The agent noted that Logan had been physically able to get up and down the hill from his home to the crime scene when he met with officers on February 17th. The agent was specific. They believed Logan could be involved in the murders. I believe that there is probable cause to believe that Ronald Logan has committed the crime of murder, and evidence of that could be found on Ronald Logan's property. Ronald Logan died in 2020 and was never even officially named as a suspect in the Delphi murders. Another strange connection worth mentioning is the fact that on December 6, 2021, Indiana State Police investigating the Delphi murders asked for help from anyone who had contact with Anthony Schott's account profile. Detectives said the account with the username Anthony_Schatz was used on Snapchat and Instagram among other social media platforms in 2016 and 2017. It's important to point out the fact that only minutes before Libby captured the video of the man known as Bridge Guy, she had posted a picture of her best friend on Snapchat as they walked along the Monon High Bridge. State police say the person behind the account used photos of a male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. Investigators say the person used the profile to communicate with underage girls to solicit nude images and want to know if anyone got requests to get their address or to try to meet with them. Police said they've identified the male model that was used in the photos on the account and say that man is not a person of interest in the Delphi case.
Who is Anthony Schatz for real? Well, the Indiana man who admits to creating that Anthony Schatz social media profile is actually Keegan Anthony Klein. He's 27 years old. He's been held for over a year now in the Miami County Jail on child pornography charges. On February 25th, 2017, Indiana State Police, the FBI, and Peru Police served a search warrant at a house in Peru where Klein was living with his father. That's 11 days after the bodies of Abby Williams and Libby German were found about 37 miles away in Delphi. Investigators confiscated a half-dozen phones and electronic devices. Klein admitted in court documents to using the Anthony Schatz profile to communicate with underage girls and ask for sexual images. Court records say they found hundreds of sexually explicit photos and videos on the devices, many from locations across Indiana, including Indianapolis, Kokomo, and Bunker Hill. But court documents also say that Klein factory reset one phone 2 days before police arrived and deleted the internet history and social media apps from another phone before turning it over to police 2 days after he was interviewed. Klein was not charged until August 19, 2020. He faces 30 felony counts from 2016 and 17 for possession of child pornography, child exploitation, obstruction of justice, and synthetic identity deception.
As we fall further and further down the Delphi rabbit hole, I happen to uncover the most unusual yet extraordinary thread of evidence, which presents an entirely different version of this case. It seems far more plausible than that of the official narrative. Based on court documents indicating that a memorandum submitted to the court by Richard Allen's attorneys in September 2023, The Independent reported, the then 50-year-old local man maintained his innocence of the 2017 killings and instead claimed the murders were carried out by a pagan cult hijacked by white nationalists, members of a pagan Norse religion called Odinism, hijacked by white nationalists, ritualistically sacrificed Abigail Williams and Liberty German, his attorneys wrote in the documents. Allen's attorneys said that possible Odinism signatures were left behind by the killers at the crime scene, with the victims' bodies staged by trees, with branches and sticks laid across their bodies in the shape of pagan symbols. The murders of Libby and Abby had never been publicly linked to Odinism before the defense made the claims, but according to Allen's attorneys, law enforcement officials did explore the cult's possible involvement early on in the investigation, as far back as February 2018. After reading through the facts in this dense 136-page memorandum filed and submitted to the court September 2023, my mind was flooded with the terrifying prospect of a major cover-up underway. According to the memorandum, overwhelming evidence in this case supports the following. Members of a pagan Norse religion called Odinism, hijacked by white nationalists, ritualistically sacrificed Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Very early on, those in charge of the Delphi murder investigation claimed that they consulted with a Purdue professor concerning what resembled possible Odinism signatures left behind at the crime scene. After the Purdue professor proclaimed, according to State Trooper Jerry Holman, that it was not Odinism or any type of cult worshipping or any type of group that would have conducted the crime, the Odinism angle was essentially abandoned. However, as of September 7, 2023, the leaders of the Delphi investigation team claimed that they can't identify who this purported professor was, and provided no reports from this purported professor, and have further indicated they may never be able to figure out who this professor is. Based in large part upon this mystery Purdue professor's opinion, Delphi investigative leadership claimed that it essentially abandoned considering Odinite involvement in the murders. And then the years passed. 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Thankfully, during those passing years, law enforcement officers Kevin Murphy, Greg Ferenczi, and Todd Click continued to pursue the truth. Because of their curiosity and investigative efforts, evidence establishing the names of the likely murdering members of this Odinite cult became known to the Delphi investigative leadership no later than February 2018. Due to either incompetence or a concerted intentionality, those in charge of the investigation refused to arrest or even properly investigate these obvious suspects. On May 1, 2023, the state of Indiana, by way of prosecutor Nick McClelland, received a letter from former Rushville Assistant Police Chief Todd Click, now retired. As stated before, Click, Murphy, and Ferenczi are three of the law enforcement officers who worked on the Delphi murder case, particularly focused on the Odinite angle as it intersected with suspects in Rushville, Indiana. After reading Richard Allen's probable cause affidavit, Click became concerned that the information contained in Richard Allen's affidavit, pointing the finger at Richard Allen, was far less compelling than the totality of the information that Detective Ferenczi, Detective Murphy, and Officer Click had accumulated during the Rushville portion of the investigation. The information that Murphy, Ferenczi, and Click had gathered during their investigation connected men who practiced Odinism in or near Delphi with another group of men who lived in Rushville, and then connected both groups of men to the murders. Click was concerned that for some reason, the leadership of the investigative team had failed to share with Prosecutor McClelland the evidence gathered by Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy. Click's concerns led him to seek out a lawyer to assist him in the drafting of a letter. This letter was then sent to McClelland. This letter was not provided to the defense until after it was obvious from the last round of depositions that the defense, who had doggedly pursued witnesses as far away as Georgia, would certainly be talking with Todd Click. McClelland had this letter in his possession for over 4 months before turning it over to the defense. There can be no mistaking that this letter is exculpatory in nature and could have been used by the defense as it prepared for upcoming depositions. However, it is apparent that McClelland only offered up the letter after it was obvious that the defense team would soon be learning of the letter's existence. In other words, the defense team would obviously be meeting with or deposing Click in the next few weeks. At that time, Click most certainly would then reveal to the defense that in April of 2023, he, Click, had sent a letter containing exculpatory information to Prosecutor McClelland. At this point, McClelland had two distinct choices: sit on the exculpatory evidence, hoping that the defense team would refocus its efforts on another angle of the investigation, or disclose the exculpatory evidence, claiming that the contents of the letter were overlooked in the volume of discovery. He chose the latter. Unfortunately for the state, neither approach explains away the fact that Click specifically directed the letter to McClelland himself, and further, Click was so determined to ensure his information was consumed by McClelland that he directed the information directly to McClelland via certified mail. The letter is stamped, received May 1st, 2023, Carroll County Prosecutor. Click's report landed at Ground Zero, a prosecutor's office with no more than 2 full-time prosecutors and a handful of full-time staff members at best. Could this exculpatory evidence have been completely overlooked? Not plausible. Not only did the prosecution withhold that letter from the defense, but law enforcement also withheld several other exculpatory pieces of evidence, including an 85-page compilation of reports by Click, prepared in 2019, and several videos containing statements that support the defense theory of Richard Allen's innocence. This 85-page report detailed the investigative work performed by Click, Ferenczi, and Murphy, and others, including the FBI. According to the summary of Click's investigation that he attached with this letter, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, BAU, of the FBI determined that the individuals responsible for the homicides were involved in Nordic beliefs. This was news to the defense, as no member of the unified command in charge of the investigation revealed this information to the defense during recent depositions. This includes Trooper Holman, who told the defense that he didn't remember if the FBI's BAU unit determined one way or the other whether those with Nordic beliefs had been involved in the murders. At least up until the time of this filing, the prosecution has provided no evidence whatsoever of the findings of the FBI's BAU unit concerning involvement of Odinists in the murders. None. The letter that Click sent to McClelland was the first that the defense has heard that the FBI actually believed that Odinists were likely involved. In other words, this report contained exculpatory evidence that Unified Command concealed from the defense. This information was and is crucial for Richard Allen's defense. Some of this exculpatory evidence in the form of videos was finally released to the defense on September 8, 2023, over 9 months after defense counsel entered their appearance. The defense is still reviewing this September 8th evidence dump. In the brief time the defense has had to review this newly received evidence, it has found exculpatory evidence both in the videos the defense has watched and the documents that the defense has reviewed. While the prosecution has been holding on to this exculpatory evidence, Richard Allen has been living in hell. Lastly, the evidence will show that the week of August 28, 2023, Prosecutor McClelland and State Trooper Jerry Holman requested a meeting with Todd Click. By this time, the defense team had taken several depositions, including Holman, Leggett, and Leesenby. The prosecution and Delphi investigative leadership now knew that for a while, the defense team had been aware of the Odinist evidence, at least the evidence that the prosecution turned over to the defense scattered throughout multiple hard drives and many flash drives. The prosecution had learned in early August that the defense had figured out the strong Odinist ties to the crimes, despite the apparent attempts of the prosecution, Leggett, and Holman to hide this exculpatory information from the defense. Wanting to allay his fears that an innocent man was sitting in Westville, Click agreed to attend the meeting with Holman, hoping that he would be learning that evidence did in fact exist linking Richard Allen to the murders. Click's hopes were dashed. Paragraph 17 of Click's affidavit says the following: Upon directing the letter to Mr. McClelland, I heard nothing from the prosecutor's office or any other members of Unified Command until I received phone calls on August 23rd and August 25th, 2023, which involved brief discussions regarding scheduling. During these phone calls, it was requested that I meet with Trooper Holman during the week of September 4th, 2023. I was informed that law enforcement officials intended to sit down with me and discuss with me the reasons why Richard Allen was responsible for these crimes. I was told that he, Jerry Holman, wanted to put my mind at ease. However, during the meeting with Detective Holman and the second detective, whose name I am unfamiliar with, there was no discussion or offerings as to why they believed Richard Allen was guilty of the charged crimes. I believe the interview was an attempt by them to clean up their loose ends, knowing that they had given very little, if any, attention to the investigative efforts of myself, Detective Ferenczi, and Detective Murphy. Emphasis added. Not only did Carroll County Sheriff Tony Leggett fail to include all this Odinite information in his October 13, 2022 affidavit for search warrant, and not only did McClelland and the Unified Command withhold exculpatory evidence, Leggett also concealed damaging witness statements that devastate Leggett's timeline. A timeline Leggett needed to be true in order to place Richard Allen at the trail when Abby and Libby were abducted. Additionally, Leggett lied in his affidavit about the statements of another key witness, further devastating Leggett's timeline. Richard Allen has zero connections to any pagan cult or pagan cultists, and furthermore, no forensic evidence, such as DNA or electronic evidence, links Richard Allen to the girls or to the crime scene, i.e., he is a completely innocent man. Most of the evidence backing these assertions was found scattered over no less than 10 hard drives and several flash drives provided by the prosecution, meaning that the defense is not making wild accusations, but rather primarily relaying facts and information that is backed up by the prosecutor's own discovery, even discovery that the prosecution just provided to the defense as late as September 8, 2023. Not coincidentally, Odinist members of this same pagan cult are employed as corrections officers for the Indiana Department of Corrections at Westville Correctional Facility. It is inside of the cold, concrete walls of the maximum security unit of this dilapidated reformatory that Richard Allen is being threatened, intimidated, and mentally abused. Throughout this document, references are made to the Unified Command. Essentially, the Unified Command was the leadership of the Delphi murder investigation, according to Tony Leggett, Carroll County Sheriff and member of Unified Command when the investigation began. Unified Command consisted of law enforcement from a variety of entities, local, state, and federal. Unified Command were overseers of the entire investigative operation. Odinism is the pagan religion referenced throughout these court documents, and its followers are called Odinists. Odinists are enamored of Viking Nordic culture. Evidence supports that at the crime scene, these murdering Odinites left behind obvious signatures, symbols in the form of runes. These runes were formed with sticks, fashioned with tree branches, and painted using the blood of Liberty German. Sticks and tree branches were deliberately, carefully, and proficiently placed on each girl in a certain arrangement, mimicking certain runes. At least one of the branches appeared to have its end cut off cleanly by some type of tool, like an electric saw, providing proof of a preconceived plan. Additionally, the blood of Liberty German was used as the paint to mark a tree with a rune that looked similar to the letter F. With a simple Google search, these runes would be identifiable as one of the many calling cards of this pagan religious cult. Yet law enforcement in charge of the Delphi investigation seemingly and quickly abandoned the obvious correlation between the crime scene and Odinism, despite an obscene amount of evidence linking Odinism to the crime scene, and even in spite of powerful evidence linking specific Odinites in and around Indiana to the murders. Also, the court will learn in his affidavit for search warrant, the Sheriff Leggett failed to inform Judge Diner that nothing, absolutely nothing, links Richard Allen to Odinism or any religious cult. Also, no forensics, such as DNA, no electronic data extracted from his computers or phones or from his social media, links Richard Allen to the crime scene. Additionally, nothing links Richard Allen to any of the Odinite suspects. The same Odinite suspects that evidence strongly supports sacrificed Abby and Libby in some sort of pagan ritual. Richard Allen had nothing to do with this crime, but rather is an innocent man, a patsy for the police, arrested 26 days before an election. Based on the footnotes provided in the memorandum, State Police Superintendent Doug Carter pulled the plug and kicked the FBI off the Delphi murder case around 2021 over some alleged conflicts, according to Jerry Holman's deposition. Interestingly, Tony Leggett, who was deposed before Holman, claimed under oath that Doug Carter was not involved in making decisions for the case. Furthermore, he, Leggett, claimed to be unaware that the FBI was even kicked out at all, let alone that any agency had actually kicked out the FBI from investigating the Delphi case. It is quite odd that the salient topic of Doug Carter kicking the FBI off of the Delphi case would never have been discussed between Leggett and Holman, who were working so closely with one another in unified command. If that can be believed, it would be quite perplexing. Merriam-Webster defines a rune as any of the characters of any of several alphabets used by the Germanic peoples from about the 3rd to the 13th centuries. Many runes look like the letter F, including a rune called Ansus, which, among other things, stands for Odin. Law enforcement's failure to actively pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is confounding. It is even more confounding when days and weeks after the murders, a particular Odinite from Logansport named Brad Holder posted on social media images mimicking the very runes found at the crime scene. A crime scene unreleased and unknown to the general public even to this day. Who was Brad Holder? He was an Odinite whose son, Logan, had been dating Abby. Brad Holder's social media posts seemingly taunted the very police that refused to fully investigate him. The defense believes that the court will be shocked at the number of clues or Easter eggs, both before and after the murders, that Holder openly posted on his Facebook page, pointed the finger to his involvement in the murders. However, a fact that is simply mind-blowing to the defense is that Brad Holder was never even considered a suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby. State Trooper Jerry Holman, one of the law enforcement officers in charge of organizing and investigating the Delphi murders, claimed in his August 10, 2023 deposition that Brad Holder was not really ever a suspect. Police reports written near the time of the murders reveal that Jerry Holman is telling the truth. Brad Holder was cleared as a suspect quickly on March 16, 2017. On March 1, 2017, Tony Leggett stated in a report that there were no leads required concerning Brad Holder, meaning that it was not necessary for law enforcement to continue to look for leads related to Brad Holder. Leggett made that determination a mere 15 days after the girls were murdered. On March 16, 2023, Unified Command member Kevin Hammond wrote that Brad Holder had been cleared. The girls hadn't been dead for 30 days, and Unified Command had already cleared Brad Holder as a suspect. Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect within 30 days, knowing that Brad Holder's son dated Abby. Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect within 30 days of the murders, although a simple review of Brad Holder's Facebook page would show that he, Brad Holder, was a proud Odinite that had an absolute obsession and fascination with runes. Police knew, or had to know, that runes had been left at the crime scene. Additionally, Unified Command had already cleared Holder as a suspect in spite of the fact that runes found on Brad Holder's Facebook pages mimicked runes found at a crime scene that had not been released to the public. The investigation had barely begun. The Unified Command had already cleared the very man that any person with even a small amount of common sense or curiosity would believe was a strong candidate for being involved in the murder of the girls. For example, the court will also learn that the Unified Command was aware of a very disturbing image on Brad Holder's social media accounts that actually mimicked the crime scene. On April 12, 2017, Trooper Joseph Ryan Winters received a phone call from a man in Georgia named Ryan Boucher, who had discovered disturbing images in Brad Holder's social media account. Having somehow learned that Brad Holder's son, Logan, had dated Abby Williams, Mr. Boucher began reviewing Brad Holder's social media history. One of the images Boucher viewed on Brad Holder's social media account was an image of two women either dead or posed as if they were dead, on the ground in what appeared to be a forest. Both women had tree limbs and sticks arranged on their bodies. One of the women had her arm stretched above her head, similar to the way that Libby's arm was stretched above her head. Both women were clothed, and the stick and tree branch formations on these girls was different than the stick and tree branch formations on Abby and Libby, but otherwise it bore a very eerie similarity to the murder scene in Delphi. Ryan Boucher had no knowledge of the actual crime scene. However, after reviewing Brad Holder's social media sites, Boucher was disturbed at that image, as well as other images that provided insight into Brad Holder's fascination with runes. Believing that the disturbing images may be something of interest to those investigating the Delphi murders, Mr. Boucher contacted Cobb Liaisonby, who at the time was the sheriff of Carroll County. Liaisonby quickly rebuffed Boucher, telling Boucher that Holder was not a suspect. Undeterred, Mr. Boucher contacted the state police, where he ended up talking to Trooper Joseph Ryan Winters. After their conversation, Winters memorialized the interaction and placed the images provided by Boucher into a Dropbox account. After creating the report, Winters then discussed his findings face-to-face with Jerry Holman of Unified Command. In his report, Winters requested law enforcement to re-interview Brad Holder. The defense does not believe Unified Command ever followed up on Winters' request. It should be noted the disturbing images found by Boucher in Georgia and placed in a Dropbox by Winters were not, and have still not, been provided to the defense. In his recent deposition, Winters said that he had attempted to locate the images but was unable. However, because of the potential importance of those images to Richard Allen's case, the defense team located Boucher and then traveled to Georgia to meet with Boucher. Those images are now in the possession of Richard's defense team, who then provided those images to law enforcement. Again, these were important images that law enforcement failed to turn over to the defense. Instead, the defense located these images in Georgia and then turned them over to the very people who had the obligation to provide them to the defense. Unified Command, which included Tony Leggett, who drafted the affidavit for search warrant, was fully aware of the mimicked crime scene on Brad Holder's social media, as well as other posts that mimicked the exact runes found at the crime scene, but failed to do anything about it, and failed to inform Judge Diner of this obvious suspect, Brad Holder, and all of the evidence that existed against Holder, making him a prime suspect. According to the memorandum, court will learn that Holder was connected to the crime scene, and to other men who had confessed to the crime. The evidence of those connections are provided in the body of the memorandum, including copies of the images found on Holder's Facebook page at the time of the investigation, which link Holder to the crime scene, as well as the images found by Ryan Boucher that law enforcement has failed to turn over to the defense. The defense will also attach what the defense calls the Winters Report, which is the memorialization of Trooper Winters' interaction with Ryan Boucher. Leggett provided none of this evidence or information to Judge Diner, but rather allowed Judge Diner to believe that Richard Allen was a lone suspect in the murders, in spite of zero evidence linking Richard Allen to the crimes at the time Leggett sought the search warrant 26 days before an election. The defense claims the position of William's body echoes that of a painting titled Odin Hanging from World Tree. Filing calls the painting evidence of an additional dark demonic component to Odinism, citing articles concerning Odinist human sacrifice and imagery found on the internet. Lawyers cited imagery online of a man hanging upside down from a tree who has been sliced in the neck with blood dripping to the ground. This man's arms are posed similarly to Abby's at the crime scene. This man's legs are also posed similarly to Abby's at the crime scene. His left leg is straight and his right leg is bent at the knee. The only difference is that the man's right leg is placed over the left leg, while Abby's right leg was posed under her left leg. While disturbing, the image appears to be depicting a foundational myth in Norse belief, wherein Odin sacrificed himself on the branches of the world tree, stabbing himself and hanging upside down for 9 days to obtain the wisdom of the runes. Unified Command's failure to vigorously pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more perplexing when evidence known to law enforcement demonstrated a clear nexus between Brad Holder and at least 4 other suspects: Elvis Fields from Rushville, Patrick Westfall from Delphi, Donnie Messer from Rushville, and Rod Abrams from Rushville, now living in Connorsville. Unified Command was aware that Elvis Fields confessed to his sister that he, Elvis, was involved in the murders, even providing to his sister intimate crime scene details of which only those present at the crime scene would have familiarity. Additionally, Elvis Fields told his sister Mary on February 14, 2017, that he was present at the killings and that he, Elvis, now had a brother and was now part of a gang. In February 2018, Elvis had been questioned by law enforcement, but denied involvement in the murders. However, after being dropped off at his trailer following the questioning, Elvis turned around, walked back to the police car, and according to the police report, asked the state trooper if his spit is found on one of the girls, but he could explain it away. Would he still be in trouble? The state trooper that heard Elvis utter these words, Kevin Murphy, was not part of Unified Command, but immediately relayed Elvis's disturbing question to Jay Harper of Unified Command. Elvis also admitted to a different sister, Joyce, that he had in fact spit on one of the girls. Elvis told Joyce that he was on a trail and a bridge with 2 girls that were killed and that he was going away for a long time. Elvis's alibi for February 13, 2017 was also probably flawed. State troopers who weren't part of Unified Command determined that Elvis's roommate concocted a story concerning Elvis's whereabouts on February 13, 2017. This roommate is named Rod Abrams. Abrams told a story claiming on February 13, 2017, that he, Rod Abrams, Elvis Fields, and a man named Ned Smith were visiting a sick friend in Muncie. Unfortunately for Rod Abrams, this story conflicted with the story that Elvis Fields told law enforcement as to his whereabouts on February 13, 2017. These shady alibis were relayed to Unified Command. Furthermore, Unified Command knew that on February 1, 2018, Elvis's sister passed a polygraph examination when asked if she were telling the truth about what Elvis had confessed to her. Unified Command's failure to vigorously pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more inexplicable when evidence known to law enforcement included information about another Odinite named Patrick Westfall, who was living in Delphi, very close to the murder scene at the time. Evidence known to Unified Command included the fact that fellow Odinites Patrick Westfall and Brad Holder were close friends as late as January 21, 2017. However, that friendship ended very abruptly in February 2017. The schism in their friendship resulted from a fight that occurred between Holder and Westfall in February, where he, Holder, and Westfall were in the woods near a river conducting a ritual. One of them said or did something the other did not agree with, and they no longer talked to each other. The river was near Patrick's house. An intoxicated Brad Holder shared this disturbing information with his ex-wife, Amber Holder. Amber Holder then relayed this disturbing information to law enforcement, who were not a part of Unified Command in 2019. These officers then relayed this disturbing information to Unified Command. Leggett concealed this information from Judge Diner. In 2019, Unified Command learned that in a totally different conversation with his ex-wife, Brad Holder pointed the finger away from himself and directly at Patrick Westfall as being the person actually responsible for the murders of Abby and Libby. According to police reports, Brad Holder told his ex-wife, Amber Holder, that Westfall and his people killed Abigail Williams and Liberty German because one of their mothers was mixing with other people outside the mother's race. Furthermore, Unified Command was aware that Brad Holder had told Amber that I can only protect you so much if you keep asking questions. Brad Holder further told his ex-wife, Amber, that Patrick Westfall had many people backing him up, and that Westfall also had powerful friends. Leggett knew of this information for more than 3 years before Leggett sought a search warrant for Richard Allen's house, yet Leggett never shared that information with Judge Diner. Additionally, Westfall provided a very weak alibi as to his whereabouts on February 13th. Westfall told law enforcement that he was at home the afternoon of Monday, February 13th, 2017. The defense is unaware of any search warrant that Leggett sought to enter Westfall's house, or whether Unified Command instructed law enforcement to knock on a single neighbor's door to verify Westfall's alibi. Unified Command's failure to continually pursue the obvious links between the crime scene and Odinism is even more disturbing when evidence known to law enforcement included information about another Odinite named Johnny Messer from Rushville. Johnny was a recruiter for the Odinists and was also the connective tissue between the Odinites from the Delphi area, Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall, and the suspects from the Rushville area, Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams. Delphi is located 126 miles from Rushville. Law enforcement knew that Johnny Messer was friends with Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall. Law enforcement also knew that Messer was acquaintances with Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams. Unified Command theoretically could claim, and actually appear to be claiming, that this connection is simply a bizarre coincidence. However, Unified Command not only knew that Elvis Fields and Rod Abrams and Brad Holder and Patrick Westfall shared a common acquaintance in Johnny Messer, but also that Elvis Fields and Brad Holder followed each other on Facebook and even mimicked each other's Facebook pages, with Elvis Fields actually recreating the photos that Holder posted on his Facebook page. Shockingly, at his August 10, 2023 deposition, Unified Command member Jerry Holman claimed that he did not even know who Johnny Messer was, nor what the evidence showed of Messer's possible role in the murders of Abby and Libby. It is additionally infuriating that Johnny Messer was cleared as a suspect in the murders when considering these facts. Johnny's ex-girlfriend, Taylor Hornaday, told police that Johnny Messer and Patrick Westfall were like brothers. She also told police that she had allowed Johnny to borrow her car on or around Valentine's Day 2017, and that Johnny drove her car up there to hang with his Vinlander friends. When he returned her vehicle, it had dried blood over one side of it. Johnny Messer refused to discuss the details of how the blood got there. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend further stated that it took her several car washes to finally remove the blood. Meanwhile, Messer has claimed that he had never, not once in his life, been to Delphi, home of his brother, Patrick Westfall, and near the home of his other Odinite brother, Brad Holder. Again, based on the available footnotes, Vinlander is a word interchangeable with those that practice Odinism. As State Trooper Roland Purdy stated in his deposition, all members of Vinlanders are also Odinists. Basically, The Vinlanders are a white supremacist group consisting of Odinists. Brad Holder, Patrick Westphal, and Johnny Messer were all affiliated with the Vinlander group. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend Taylor Hornaday also confirmed that all Vinlanders were also all Odinists, and that Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, and Patrick Westphal were all members of Vinlander. Messer's ex-girlfriend also told law enforcement that Brad Holder and Johnny Messer were two of the most violent people she knew and were fully capable of having been involved in the murders. Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend further stated that a motive for their involvement in the murder of Abby and Libby might be the concept of blood in and blood out, which means social acceptance into their secret circles. All this information was relayed to Leggett and the Unified Command team, yet Unified Command provided no guidance as to what to do to capitalize on this information in order to work towards solving the murders. Additionally, Unified Command learned that Johnny Messer's ex-girlfriend had been listening to and recording Johnny Messer's phone calls. Police secured the phone and listened to 3 phone calls involving Johnny Messer. In 2 of those phone calls, Messer was offering money to other people to find someone so they can be injured or killed. The 3rd call involves Messer bragging about holding a subject hostage and shooting them at his house. Essentially, Unified Command said, "Nothing to see here," regarding Johnny Messer, and issued no search warrants for his home, nor did they attempt to utilize an age-old investigative tool referred to as an interrogation to pursue the truth about the involvement of Johnny Messer, Brad Holder, or Patrick Westphal in these crimes. The evidence shows that during his pretrial incarceration at Westville Correctional Facility, Richard Allen has been monitored, intimidated, and mentally abused by correctional officers who are also members of the Odinite cult. 2 of those correctional officers are named Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones. These Westville Corrections officers boldly wore patches on their Department of Corrections DOC uniforms, which proclaimed, "In Odin we trust," along with another patch displaying symbols of Odinism, interlocking triangles. Both Odinite correctional officers, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones, also display images of runes and/or other Odinite symbols on their Facebook pages. As recently as June 25, 2023, for example, Odinite Sergeant Robinson openly displayed a photograph of his Odinite altar on his Facebook page. A similar altar can be found on the Facebook page of Brad Holder. Beginning at least on April 3, 2023, Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson wore their Odin patches when the defense team visited Richard Allen. However, Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones' brazen display of their Odinite patches came to an end on August 17, 2023. What changed? Why suddenly did they no longer display their Odinite patches beginning on the August 17, 2023 visit between Richard Allen and his defense team? Here is your possible answer. It was not until an August 10, 2023 deposition of Trooper Jerry Holman that Richard Allen's defense team finally revealed to the prosecutor and to Unified Command that for many months they, Richard Allen's defense team, had been fully aware of the strong evidence linking Odinism to the murders. It was also at the August 10th deposition that the Unified Command learned that Richard Allen's defense team was not only aware of this information, but also intended to expose the linkage of Abby's and Libby's murders to Odinism and would also be revealing the names of the Odinists at trial. At that deposition, Holman and the prosecutor also learned that the defense team obviously intended on exposing the Unified Command's utter failure in pursuing the Odinist suspects, in spite of the powerful evidence of Odinites' involvement in the murders. However, and this is important to note, at his August 10, 2023 deposition, Richard's defense team did not let Holman or anyone else know that it was fully aware of the Odinite corrections officers at Westville wearing "In Odin We Trust" patches. Richard Allen's defense team's next visit with Richard Allen at Westville, following the August 10th deposition, occurred 1 week later on August 17th. Curiously, Or perhaps not so curiously. In those 7 days since the defense team revealed their knowledge that evidence linked Odinists to the murders, for the first time, Sergeant Robinson was no longer wearing his Odin patch. It was almost as if someone had alerted Odinite Robinson that the gig was up, because the lawyers knew about the links to Odinism. To lose the patch and pray that the defense attorneys had never noticed the patches on prior visits. Unfortunately for Westville and Unified Command, Rick's defense team absolutely noticed the Odinite patches worn by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones beginning April 3rd. Furthermore, Rick's defense team absolutely noticed the conspicuous absence of Sergeant Robinson's Odin patches following Trooper Holman's realization that Rick's defense team was fully aware of the connection between the murders and Odinism, as well as the failure of the Unified Command to follow through on the evidence that linked the murders to Odinism. In this memorandum, the court will also learn that Sergeant Jones and Sergeant Robinson were seemingly always by Richard Allen's side during most, if not every visit. Normally, corrections officers, usually Sergeant Robinson and/or Sergeant Jones, were within earshot of every conversation between Richard and his attorneys and between Richard and his wife. Close enough that Richard would have to be worried about any conversation with his attorneys and with his wife being overheard by Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant Jones or other corrections officers. At one such meeting with his attorneys, Richard Allen mumbled in a somewhat incoherent fashion that Odinites were threatening him. Leggett concealed certain witness testimony and falsified other witness testimony in order to prevent Leggett's bogus timeline from being exposed to Judge Diner. Beyond the shocking omissions concerning the pagan cult's links to the murders and the fact that Odinists were also watching Richard Allen, akin to foxes watching the hen house, the evidence will show that Leggett's affidavit for search warrant is also filled with lies and other concealed information concerning witness testimony. This false and concealed information completely eviscerates the state's timeline. The evidence will show that Tony Leggett knew of the major problems that these witnesses' testimony created, and Leggett chose to solve his problem by concealing this information and even falsifying other information in order to bolster the state's bogus timeline. It's important to remember that State Police Superintendent Doug Carter apparently pulled the plug and kicked the FBI off the Delphi murder case around 2021 over some alleged conflicts, if only to understand this final extraordinary layer to our story, which seems to involve a complicated cover-up, including the arrest of one federal investigator and the death of another. WIBC News Indianapolis reported that former investigator Todd Click was once thought to be one of the strongest chess pieces for attorneys Andrew Baldwin and Brad Rossi, who represent Richard Allen, the man charged with the 2017 double murder of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Click was a part of a 3-man investigative unit formed in 2018 to investigate potential ties between the girls' murders and men in the Carroll County area with ties to Odinism and ritual killings. That unit was disbanded after the 2021 murder of Detective Greg Ferenczi, who was also a member of the Odinism investigative unit. The United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Indiana issued a press release Wednesday, January 19, 2022, reporting that a federal grand jury in Indianapolis returned an indictment today charging a Terre Haute man with the murder of a federal officer, attempted arson of federal property, and using a firearm during a crime of violence causing death. The charges against Shane Meehan, 45, stem from the July 7, 2021 killing of Terre Haute police detective and FBI task force officer Gregory Ferenczi. Meehan was previously charged by a federal criminal complaint filed on July 8, 2021. Based on the court documents, on July 7, 2021, Meehan drove his pickup truck to the gate of the FBI resident agency building in Terre Haute. Meehan exited his truck and threw a Molotov cocktail toward the building. Shortly thereafter, Terry Hout police detective and FBI task force officer Gregory Ferenczi walked out of the FBI building and was confronted by Meehan, who was holding a firearm. Meehan shot task force officer Ferenczi, who died of his injuries. According to court documents, an FBI agent inside the office heard the shots, came out, and got into a gun battle with Meehan. Meehan was reportedly hit twice and managed to somehow get to his truck and drive to the hospital. He underwent surgery for his wounds and was later taken into custody. Interestingly, Shane Meehan, the accused gunman in the shooting, is a former employee of the high-security federal prison in Terre Haute. He even ran for mayor as an independent in 2019, finishing last in a four-way race with 1% of the vote. If you can believe it, he ran on an anti-gun violence platform. A video story on Meehan's candidacy for mayor said he had lived in Terre Haute his entire life. He retired from the Terre Haute Federal Penitentiary and was working for UPS in 2019. Meehan said he wanted to show that a political outsider could win, and said schools were one of the biggest challenges Terre Haute faced. On November 25, 2024, a federal court conveniently ruled that Shane Meehan is not competent to stand trial for the 2021 fatal shooting of Terre Haute police detective and FBI liaison Greg Ferenczi. The judge found that Meehan is presently suffering from a mental disease, rendering him mentally incompetent to the extent that he is unable to understand the nature and the consequences of the proceedings against him or assist properly in his defense. Former investigator Todd Click testified in early 2024 that he came forward to Carroll County prosecutor Nick McClelland after Richard Allen was arrested in 2022 and expressed concern about the substance behind Allen's arrest. Click felt prosecutor McClelland did not have a strong case against Allen, and that there were other men who Click felt made much stronger suspects in the murders of Williams and German. Allen's defense has long held the belief that men with ties to Odinism killed the girls as part of a sacrifice. The defense is no longer allowed to bring that information before the jury come October 14th. That also includes information the defense may have had on Ronald Logan, Keegan Klein, geofencing data, and more. McClelland objected to Click's assertions, claiming Click may have a history of lying. McClelland then requested Click's employment records. Lafayette Journal and Courier published a report in April 2024 which revealed that Special Judge Francis Gohl had approved Carroll County Prosecutor Nicholas McClelland's motion to get Rushville Police Chief Todd Click's personnel records to discover if Click has any issues that might impeach his credibility as a witness for Delphi murder suspect Richard Allen. Click's investigation into Odinists being involved in the killings of Delphi teenagers Libby German and Abby Williams makes him a witness for Richard Allen's defense. McClelland indicated in his Tuesday motion that prosecutors believe Click's employee records will show incidents of untruthfulness or credibility issues. The motion included a subpoena ordering the Rushville police chief to turn over those documents. According to online court records, Gohl signed the court order for the subpoena. Rushville police chief Todd Click, member of the Odinism investigative unit formed in 2018, and an expected key defense witness in the Delphi murders trial, was subsequently arrested and charged by Ripley County authorities with forgery, official misconduct, and obstruction of a child abuse assessment while working as a family case manager with the Department of Child Services. Judge Francis Gohl has since blocked all testimony about Odinism during the trial of Richard Allen. I, for one, am very skeptical of the charges being levied against former investigator Todd Click, which seem to have strategically undermined his personal credibility while simultaneously providing the pretext for Judge Gohl to block all testimony regarding the clear and obvious Odinist connections to the Delphi murders. His initial hearing was held Monday morning, October 7, 2024. He was released on his own recognizance. His pretrial hearing was set for November 12th and another for January 27, 2025. His trial date is scheduled for February 18, 2025. As our perilous journey through this inverted moral landscape comes to an end, we are left with a profound sense of righteous indignation. As they say, truth is far stranger than fiction. Re-emerging from the darkest layers of modern society, which largely remain in the shadows, deliberately obscuring the vision of the general public. Our undisclosed enemies, shrouded in darkness, intentionally unraveling the very moral fabric disrupting the international community at large. As we remain headstrong in the pursuit of truth, we stumble across the path of our common enemy, possessed with the darkest ambitions, unbeknownst to the vast majority, involving complicated cover-ups, sexual blackmail, childhood trauma, methods of mind control, and even ritualized murder or blood sacrifice requiring the use of ancient runes by various groups who tend to believe in the magical elements of neo-paganism. We must first understand the reconstructed ideology of our enemy if we are to defend against them. Again, I'm reminded of the quote, long attributed to Italian poet and philosopher Dante Alighieri. The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis.